Hi everyone, I'm here today on this very wet and windy summer's day to give you as many book recommendations as I can before my camera battery dies. That is today's challenge. I went on Instagram and I asked you to send me your book recommendation requests, you know? I am looking for a crime novel set in the woods in the 1940s or something like that. And I'm going to go through all of your requests now, or as many as I can get to, and I'm going to give you as many book recommendations as I can. I will list the books I mention in the description box down below, and I will insert the covers on the screen as I go. Recommending books is one of my favourite things to do. I was a bookseller for 10 years. It's great. I miss recommending books in person, so we're doing it via video. Let us begin. I would like a novel with a female protagonist who overcomes societal or inner expectations, like Miss Benson's Beetle. Miss Benson's Beetle is very fun, bit of a camp romp, really. I enjoyed it. For a book with a protagonist that overcomes societal ableist expectations, I would very much recommend Show Us Who You Are by Elle McNicoll, which is a brilliant book where the main character, Cora, breaks down loads of stereotypes that society has about her as a neurodivergent person. It's brilliant. Books about unexpected friendship. This is one I haven't read, but it's on my TBR and I've heard nothing but great things about it, and that is The Offering by Benjamin Myers, which I think is set just after the Second World War. And it's about a young boy who's about 16, who's a minor, who decides to walk from Durham, I think going south rather than north, through Yorkshire, and makes friends with an older woman who lives by the coast. I would like a book with queer magical realism. Record of a Night Too Brief by Hiromi Kawakami, which I read earlier this year. It has this really dreamlike feel to it. In fact, I think it is a series of dreams. It feels a bit like Lily Huang's The Evolutionary Revolution, and it is these reimaginings of a girlfriend in different forms, and sometimes the protagonist has to swallow her to save her, and sometimes she keeps her in porcelain form in her pocket. It's really weird, slightly creepy, very much enjoyed it. I would like a short story collection all about secrets. All about secrets. Well, The Secret Lives of Church Ladies by Deesha Philyaw is in the title. It's about, I think it's 9 stories, and it's about 9 black women and the secrets that they keep. It's about sexuality. It is about affairs. It is heartbreaking and wonderful, and the most perfect kind of storytelling. I'm going to talk about it more in my end of the month wrap up because I read it this month, but I just think it's as brilliant as everybody says it is. You may have heard quite a lot of people talking about it. I would like a book about swimming, preferably queer. At the Pond, Swimming at the Hampstead Ladies' Pond, is a collection of non-fiction personal essays, many of which are by queer authors. I'm also very much looking forward to Small Bodies of Water by Mingya Powles, which is coming out in the summer, which is about wild swimming too. Good books or fantasy books around children and teens in group homes. Okay, so this is not one that I have read yet, but it is on my TBR. And I think I just haven't read it yet because it is pretty huge, and that is The Grey House, which is by, let me Google. It's by Mariam Petrosyan, who's Armenian, and it's written in Russian. It's translated into English by Yuri Machkasov. It's a magical realism novel about a home for disabled children, which sounds really intriguing, but I haven't read it yet myself. Someone says autumn cottagecore romance. Well, I mean, anything by Kay O'Neill, I would say they pretty much are the definition of autumn cottagecore. I think probably the Tea Dragon Society is the most autumny out of all of their books, but because I talk about them a lot, let me recommend a different one, such as Princess Ever After, which is about 2 princesses who fall in love, and it's just lovely. It's great. A book about a family living in a hotel or camping resort. I have recommended quite a lot recently. Summerwater, The Last Resort by Carson, both of which are set on a trailer park, but those are people who are primarily, at least, going on holiday to those places. So if you're looking for a family who live there, I would recommend The Sunlight Pilgrims by Jenni Fagan, which is set on a trailer park in Scotland, and it's a collection of families who live there, and it is nearing the end of the world, and it's very, very beautifully written. I would like a book set in a bookshop run by a woman. I would recommend The Bookshop That Floated Away by Sara Henshaw, who's a friend of mine. She runs a bookshop on a boat, and if you would like something similar but more fragmented, then I would also recommend my book, The Bookshop Book, which also has a section about Sara, but is about bookshops all around the world, my favourite ones, plus the bookshop that I used to run. So I was the female bookseller who runs a bookshop in that book. Anything for fans of Jane Eyre, set in a large manor, odd relationships and characters. Well, of course there is Wide Sargasso Sea by Jean Rhys, which is inspired by Jane Eyre, and a more, I was going to say more modern, it's a more recent release, but is set around the same time, is The Confessions of Frannie Langton by Sarah Collins, which is also giving voice to a character who is not Bertha. It's not a Jane Eyre retelling, but it takes its inspiration from Jane Eyre, and it's about a woman called Frannie Langton who is on trial for murdering her mistress and her mistress's husband, and it is about her coming over to the UK and the affair that she had with her mistress. It's gothic and great. It does get quite rushed, I feel, towards the end, in a way that felt quite Dickensian. I think it was very deliberate, it was very plotty. I preferred the first half, I think, but I would definitely recommend it. I would also recommend, if we're looking at haunting stories, The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson is quite an obvious one. English Animals by Laura Kay is not about a haunted house, but it is creepy and it is set in an English manor. It's about xenophobia and taxidermy and queer relationships. Love it. And also The Little Stranger by Sarah Waters, which is very, very gothic and set in the 1950s. A novel set in Northumberland that isn't a crime or thriller. Ghost Wall by Sarah Moss, I would say, is not really a thriller. It is a small literary novel that is creepy, and it is set in Northumberland. A family have gone to an Iron Age burial site and they're learning about history, but it's more about Brexit and, again, xenophobia and belonging and patriarchy. Yeah, there's a lot in that tiny little book. I would very much recommend it. Cozy murder mystery set in the 1950s. I think E.C.R. Lorac's books were mostly written during the 1950s, and they are published by the British Library in their crime classic series. I bet they have loads of mysteries set in the 1950s, so I would definitely go and check out their website. Ocean or space-themed picture books. If I may recommend my own book, Franklin and Luna Go to the Moon, which is the second book in the Franklin and Luna series, where they, spoiler, go to the moon. It's a picture book about a book-loving dragon called Franklin and his best friend, a young girl called Luna. And in this particular book, they're searching for Franklin's family. Where do dragons come from? It's not very scientifically accurate though. So if you're looking for a book about space, which is not about dragons that live on the moon, which is understandable, then I think that the Animalium series, which is the Welcome to the Museum series, have both a space version of that book, which is called Planetarium, and a sea version, which is called Oceanarium, and they're really beautiful and huge, and I would have loved those when I was a child. There's also The Big Book of the Blue by Yuval Zoma, who wrote The Big Book of Bees, The Big Book of Blooms, Big Book of things beginning with B. I would like a recommendation for a short story collection like your book, The Beginning of the World in the Middle of the Night. Okay, I feel like I've been asked this quite a bit in previous videos, so I am going to recommend, or at least mention, something that I haven't read yet, but I bought because when I read the blurb, I thought, wait, did I write that in my sleep and then forget about it? It's called The Animal Wife by Lara Ehrlich, and in it, it has a story about a girl who's born with feathers, another one about a widow who invites a bear to sleep with her in her home, so it sounds very fantastical. I'm struggling to find crime thrillers with black protagonists. Okay, I would recommend Darling by Rachel Edwards, which is set in London just after the EU referendum vote, and it is about a woman called Darling, and we meet her when she's gone to the local corner shop and she encounters racial abuse and then meets a man called Tom, and they start communicating with each other and they go on a date, but it's mainly about her relationship with Lola, who is, I think he's called Tom, I'm pretty sure it's called Tom, Tom's daughter. And it's a really, really creepy book. But if you're looking for more of a procedural, then I would recommend Bluebird by Attica Locke. That's the first in the Darren Matthews series of crime books. He's not a cop, is he a sheriff? He travels around, he works on his own, and in Bluebird, he goes to this small town where a black person has been murdered and then a white person is murdered, and there's a lot of racial tension going on, and he is encountering a lot of abuse himself. It's on the run-up to the Trump election, or just after the Trump election in 2016, and it's really brilliant and really fantastically written. And I have the second book, which is Heaven My Home, sitting on my shelf, which I haven't read yet because the third one isn't out yet and I wanted to pace myself, but I would very much recommend that. Science fiction or fantasy that feels similar to Follow Me to Ground. So that book is by Sue Rainsford. And I think I would recommend checking out work by Alia Whiteley. She wrote a book called The Beauty, which is very similar to Follow Me to Ground. It is about women who have like mushrooms growing from their bodies. Interesting. But more recently, she has a book that has been published called Green. Am I going to remember? It's not Green Smoke, because that's a book I liked when I was younger. Let me give a quick Google. Greensmith, which is about a woman who travels across the universe. She's trying to create these plants to save humanity, or what's left of humanity. She's also written another book recently called The Skyward Inn. She's extremely prolific, which is giving me Becky Chambers vibes, though perhaps not as wholesome, because her work tends to be much more creepy. Books about food. Tiny Moons by Mingya Powles, which is about her year living in Shanghai and all the food that she ate there, and it goes through the seasons, which is really lovely. And a book that I read recently and really enjoyed is published by Dear Damsels, and it's called What She's Having, and it's a collection of short stories, non-fiction and poetry centered around women and food, and some of it is wholesome and some of it is a bit creepy and weird. It's a really good mixture of stuff. I am looking for literary journals about science. Okay, well, I recently purchased a journal called Tamarind. In fact, where is that? Is it here? Yes, in the book trolley. This is it here. Here is one that I collected earlier, or at least that came through my letterbox earlier. Tamarind, a literary magazine, says science is art. This is non-fiction and fiction about science, and I bought it because the contributors in here include Tanya Hirschman and also Pippa Goldschmidt, both of whom I have read before and really loved. Pippa is the author of the short story collection The Need for Better Regulation of Outer Space, which is a brilliant collection of short stories that all have science at their core, and there is a particular short story in there about Alan Turing which broke my heart into teeny tiny little pieces. A series of crime books set in London. You know that I'm going to recommend the Frida Klein series by Nikki French. The first one is Blue Monday. If you haven't read them yet, I mean, I'm just going to keep mentioning it till everybody has read them. Crime books with a queer lead. Okay, the Roxanne Weary series. The first one is called The Last Place That You Look, and this was a recommendation from Grace over at GK Reads. I loved it so much. I have bought the next 3 in the series. It is great. She is a private investigator, so she's not working with the police. In fact, the police kind of hate her. And yeah, she has a relationship with a man, but also with a woman as well. Bisexual, queerness, here for it, great. I would like a story about balancing being a parent whilst living with chronic illness. Still Life by Josie George is all about this, and it is so beautifully written. Middle grade detective stories. The High Rise Mystery, which is by Shana Jackson, which is about 2 kids who live in a high-rise building, and over the summer holidays there's been a murder in their tower block, and they really, really want to solve it. A novel for my grandmother who loved the Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Pie Society. The shorter the better. It's not a novel, but if she hasn't already read 84 Charing Cross Road, those are 2 books that I always pair together and recommend together because they're both about bookshops and I love bookshops. But if she has read that one, I think I would recommend The House Opposite by Barbara Noble, which I read last month. So I'll link my review in the description box down below, but it has that kind of wholesome feel to it as well. It is romantic but also realistic, plus it is also set during the Second World War, like the Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Pie Society. And finally, someone said, if I love Tesha Mosfeg, ... I think an obvious answer, and one that I would immediately go to, would be Conversations with Friends by Sally Rooney, but I feel like if you've read a Tesha Mosfeg, you've probably given Sally Rooney a go. So instead, let me recommend a book that I think in my head is going to be like a Tesha Mosfeg, but perhaps not. I haven't read it yet. It is a Japanese novel called Out, which is by, let me just double check, it's by Natsuo Kirino, and it is about a group of women who work in a factory, and one day one of them admits that she has murdered her abusive husband, and together the 5 women help her hide the fact that she has killed this person. They cover it up, but then they get dragged into the underbelly life of Tokyo in a way that they never would have expected. So it sounds dark, but also talking about really serious things and wider context of violence in the home and class. So I think that does sound like Mosfeg, but in Tokyo. I don't know if I'm pushing it a bit with that one, but you know, once I read it, I will report back and I can tell you more concretely if it is actually like a Tesha Mosfeg. But that is the gut feeling that I have in my gut, because that's what gut feelings are. Okay, there we go. Those are all of the books I'm going to recommend to you today. The battery is flashing at me now, so I'm going to stop here. I always love doing these recommendation videos. As I said, I will list the books that I've mentioned in the description box down below. I hope that you have enjoyed this video, and I hope that you're having a good start to the week. I'm sending lots of love to you all, and I will speak to you very soon. Bye.